I'm Catherine Kluver, the Executive Director of the Future of Diplomacy Project, and this morning I'm joined by Ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger, the Chairman of the Munich Security Conference, Head of Global Government Relations at Allianz, but for a long-standing career, 3 decades, a diplomat of the highest order, the German Ambassador to the United States for 5 years, the German Ambassador to the United Kingdom, and one of the key negotiators on the Balkans. Welcome, Ambassador Ischinger.
Great to be here. Good morning.
We're at an institution of higher learning where we're teaching a new generation to be responsible public leaders. The last few weeks, months, in fact years, through the Euro debt crisis, we've been looking across the pond at European leadership and this specific generation of European leaders. We spoke yesterday about the source of European leadership, and debated back and forth whether it was sufficiently there to tackle the problems we face together in the world. So I wanted to ask you about the next generation of European leaders, of German leaders. What do they need to know? How do they need to prepare to be ready to look at global challenges and tackle them in the way that they need to be addressed?
Well, thank you for that question. You know, in more ways than one, Harvard University has provided very interesting models. I'll give you one example. For the last few years, I've been the co-chair, the co-dean of something called the Bucerius Summer School, which brings together 60 or so or 70 young professionals from around the world to Hamburg, Germany, for a course on global governance. The model for this particular project was Harvard University, because my co-dean, Theo Sommer, in the 1950s, as a young man, came to Harvard and had a summer course with Henry Kissinger and was so impressed that he thought at some point we need to follow this model and try to offer an educational experience on governance issue, on global issues, to the next generation. I see, I'm very optimistic. I see a huge number of future leaders emerging from institutions of higher learning, not only from Harvard University, but also from institutions in Europe. When I was a young man, spending a year abroad was an exceptional feature, and it made you stand out. I think for the next generation of European and international and global leaders, spending a year abroad is nothing special at all, and I'm really fascinated by the number of CVs that I get to see of young people in their late 20s or early 30s who have already spent some time in China, who have experienced life, culture, politics in 2 or 3 continents, who take a truly global approach to solving political and financial issues. And within Europe itself, the next generation will be the first truly European generation. We will have to abandon, and we are about to abandon, the classic provincial approach, where people come from various corners of Europe, get together in Brussels, and then go home again. No, we're developing a European generation, which will have a much less difficult time to understand each other and to find compromise ways to move forward.
Overall, a very optimistic assessment. We're just a week after the U.S. election. The president has a huge international inbox of challenges ahead of him, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But the Spiegel, leading German news magazine, had on its cover last week Uncle Sam with a thermometer in his mouth, describing the sick patient that is the United States. And one could argue that an inward-looking European Union is just as sick in that way. Are we ailing on both sides of the Atlantic? Do we both have a fever of sorts?
Well, I mean, let's be honest, we're both not in great shape. We have huge issues in Europe, in particular in the Eurozone. Governance of the EU and of the Eurozone is a huge challenge. As I see it, the United States also has huge issues. The degree of political polarization, which has not gone away in the course of this last election, is seen, at least by many Europeans, as a threat to the role that the United States will need to continue to play globally as the only superpower. And the so-called fiscal cliff is a real challenge, probably of the same dimension as the challenges that we are facing. What we should not do is try to look at the difficulties of the partner as a way to distract from the difficulties that we're having ourselves. I think that is not a good recipe, not for Americans when they discuss the frailties and the problems of the euro instead of addressing their own hopefully future fiscal health, and for Europeans to declare that that America is now a sick patient is, of course, an unnecessary exaggeration. We are going to need each other even more in the future, and our mutual interest is to make sure that the other side of the Atlantic is hopefully going to be a healthy partner in the future. That's the common interest. So we're in this boat together.
Yeah, you've just alluded to the toxic atmosphere that we saw at the summer G20 meeting, when there was a lot of transatlantic finger pointing, which arguably has left some scar tissue. So let's get right through to the concrete point there. Do we need a next big transatlantic project in order to, if you believe that narrative, save the West or prevent the decline of the West? And if we need it, what should it be?
In my view, it is highly desirable that we try to reinvigorate the idea of the West as a community of values. But maybe even more importantly, we are suffering on both sides of the Atlantic from low growth. And if it is true what our experts tell us, that the creation of a transatlantic free trade zone, for example, could give both sides of the Atlantic a much needed boost in terms of additional growth, that's exactly what we should try to do now. It's actually long overdue. I think it's totally okay for the United States to conclude trade deals with Colombia and Indonesia and various other countries, and the same is of course happening on the European side. But why are we not tackling our own relationship? We are to each other by far the most important partner, by far, in terms of the amount of investment, in terms of the existing body of trade in both directions. So let's be sure that we understand that's our base, that's our backbone, and we need to strengthen that backbone. The future will not become easier for the transatlantic community, it will become more challenging, and that's why we should get our act together and work on getting rid of trade obstacles.
Let's stay on that for just a second. A free trade zone between the United States and Europe would have to be a long-term project. Is that sufficiently a vision to reinvigorate the peoples on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean to rally behind the fact you had plenty of people in this country who didn't understand why the European Union deserved the Nobel Peace Prize? So in terms of trying to articulate more to the voting publics on both sides of the Atlantic why this relationship is worth it, irrespective of the fact that we are, as you rightfully mentioned, half of the world, entire trade situation, is that enough? And where's the vision? Where's the story? Or as the Americans would say, where's the beef?
I think the West is a great idea, and it has tended recently to be too easily forgotten. Some people argue it doesn't really exist. I believe that there is a future for the West. We are to each other the best and in many cases the only available partner. I mean, when the United States was attacked on 9/11, where were the partners who went with the United States to Afghanistan? In Europe. Where are the partners for Europe when we need to try to take care of certain crisis situations in the Middle East or in Africa? Who will help us? The United States. So I think we are going to be of great importance to each other. What I don't think would work is if we believed that the way forward, the inspirational idea, is more, military activity. I believe that on both sides of the Atlantic there is a certain skepticism that has grown out of this last decade of, let me call it, military overreach, an exaggerated expectation that by the deployment of military force, by the use of military force, you can solve political problems. We begin to understand, again, that political problems require political solutions, and that the application of military force usually solves only a military problem. So let's be skeptical. Let's be more skeptical about the use of military force. Let's be reluctant, and let's try to look for growth and prosperity. I think that's what our citizens expect. That's what they want. And the idea of creating a transatlantic community through free trade and maybe through other activities, a trade area, a transatlantic area that would reach out and offer a hand to the Russian Federation. That's a long-term idea. It's not a very new idea. But now that President Obama has been re-elected, I think it's a useful idea for the long-term project of creating a Euro-Atlantic security community. Why do we need to live in mistrust of each other eternally between Russia on the one hand and the West? There's got to be a way for us to find a more harmonious relationship, and that is not going to happen if we Europeans try to do it on our own. We can only do it if the United States and Europe see eye to eye on this and try to approach Russia together. And the same is true, actually, vis-à-vis China. So I think there are enormous challenges out there above and beyond the purely economic question of the free trade zone. But I think that's got to be the starting point.
You've made a very articulate argument for a resurgence of multilateralism. When Peter Sutherland was on this series just a few weeks ago, having served a long time as the Director General of the WTO, he bemoaned the death of multilateralism, pointing, of course, to the lack of progress we're making on the Doha round, but then also pointing to the fact that in a globalized world, it's sometimes quicker, sometimes more efficient, to strike a deal by circumventing potentially traditional partners. And when the Obama administration announced its pivot to Asia, certainly a few Europeans thought the same. Though Anne-Marie Slaughter said at the time, look, we couldn't even conceptualize of a pivot to Asia if it were not for the strength and maturity of our European relationship. So you've just alluded to what we might do together in China. What does Europe have to offer the United States in creating, a Western relationship with China?
I think the worst recipe for transatlantic health would be if the United States pursued an approach based on military rivalry ideas regarding China, whereas the Europeans would focus on making money in China by selling automobiles and other export goods. That would not be a good division of labor. In other words, what we need to do is sit together and think about China together. I have no illusions. I don't think that there can be a detailed catalog of things that the United States and Europe wish to do with China together. But we need at least to understand what our approach vis-à-vis China is based upon, what our intentions are, what our signals are going to be. And to the extent that we can align ourselves, that we can coordinate our approaches, we will be more effective. We're going to get more out of our relationship with China. China is increasingly asserting, and I don't criticize our Chinese partners, asserting their strengths. They are the United States' biggest creditor. They are interested in having a European Union and a Eurozone that is healthy as an alternative to all of their holdings in dollars. So there is a Chinese interest in both the future of the U.S. and a decent relationship with the U.S., but also in a close relationship with Europe as a producer and as a producer of very important goods, and as one of the alternative providers of international currency.
Let's look at one region of the world where Europe has arguably had a leadership role and an impact, Iran. We talked about how Germany, in particular, is one of the few Western countries that's retained an open embassy. It pushed the EU 3+3, which more commonly referred to as the P5+1 process forward. The decision of the Europeans to act upon its sanctions decision arguably gave the final impact to make the sanctions truly stick. So can you talk a little bit about what your hopes are for the negotiation process with Iran as it goes forward? Because that is certainly, next to Syria and China, one of the top 3 international issues that the president now has to turn his attention to.
I would hesitate to speak of a European leadership role in any of these crises. I think what we should look for is continued American leadership, but coupled with an enhanced American willingness to work with us Europeans, who quite often are difficult to work with because we can't even get our own act together, and you still don't have, in some instances, the single telephone number in Brussels that you can call and get the European answer. So it is often a frustrating job, but I hope that the United States would continue to exercise its leadership role. It is a stupid idea when Der Spiegel describes the United States as a sick patient. The United States will continue for many, many years to be the only country that can actually make a difference in strategic affairs. And the Chinese are, of course, looking to Washington for the fundamental answers, just like the Russians. So our European role can be a complementary role. We can offer to contributions in those areas where we have relative strength. As far as China is concerned, that is in the area of commerce, of trade, of investment, and of a trustful relationship, which is important. I believe that the Chinese leaders have developed a sense of trust, for example, vis-à-vis the German government. They have no reason not to trust us because we are not a strategic challenge. We're not presenting a strategic challenge to them. So there are things that we can offer. On Iran, I believe that Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and others in Europe have demonstrated that we can be strong partners of the United States in providing the strictest possible sanctions. That's actually not been easy because it is European companies that have suffered. Americans have been out of the Iran trade for many, many years. So the sacrifices, if they were necessary, were made on the European side. And we did it because we believe that it is the right thing to do, to put maximum pressure on the Iranian regime in the hope that that would open additional opportunities for a negotiated settlement, because we believe, and I personally very strongly believe, that we must walk the extra mile, so to speak, in order to make sure that we are not faced with war as the only possible option.
Ambassador Ischinger, on behalf of the Future Diplomacy Project and this conversation in diplomacy, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.